Hello, everyone. I am back again. My name is Tyler, if you don't remember, and I was ID9 from 2015 until 2018. So last time we talked a little bit about some activities that you can do for teaching vocabulary, and today we're going to talk a little bit about some games, some activities that you can do for teaching listening in your classrooms. Listening is, I think, the hardest skill, in my opinion, for students because they're not confident in themselves, first of all. And secondly, because with other skills, they have more time to think. With speaking, you can kind of force students to speak even if they're not really ready because you can help them through it. You can give them one word here or there if they need it. And really, speaking just takes a lot of practice, but starting with small sentences, small phrases, they can build up to it. With reading, of course, they have lots of time to sit and they can read over and over. They can look up words in the dictionary or online until they can find the meanings. And with writing, it's kind of the same. They can practice making sentences, they can look up words if they need to. But with listening, they can't do any of that, right? They don't have those helps. It's all just listening and hoping they're getting it right. So listening is one thing that really challenges students and something that most of them aren't very confident with, and something they don't really like very much. But it is one very important skill, maybe even one of the more important skills, because when they go out into life, if they're using English for working or for whatever it is, they're going to need to be able to listen to people speaking so that they know how to respond. So we're going to talk about some activities you can do. And just like before with the vocabulary, I also went to some other people, some teacher friends, some former PCVs, and got some ideas from them of activities that they have done that have been really effective. And I'm going to share those with you today. So one of the things that you might have done during PST, or maybe will do, I know that we did it during PST, which was a really fun listening activity for learning Bahasa Indonesia, that you can also do when teaching English, is listening to a song and then filling in the missing words. So students like to do that. It's fun. They like music, so they get to listen to music while they're doing it. But one of the things is to make sure that you choose a slow-ish song, right? Your students are not going to be able to fill in blanks if they're listening to The Devil Went Down to Georgia or a rap song or something like that, right? It's going to have to be something that's relatively slow, so that they have the opportunity to be able to fill in the answers and to understand. But that's always a fun activity because it involves music and kids really like that. Another one is doing similar questions. So this is a little bit of a speaking activity and also a listening activity. So you have the students stand up and walk around, or you can pair them up however you want to do it. And you have them ask questions to each other that are similar. And they're questions that you have already taught the question and already taught the meaning and the answer to the question, how to answer the question. So this would be kind of a post activity that you're doing to practice something you've already taught them. So these questions are things like, how are you and how old are you? Because there's only one word different between those two questions, but of course they have very different meanings. Or you could have them ask questions like, what do you like and what are you like? Where the only difference is do and are. So that the students really have to be able to listen, and they have to understand what their friend is saying and be able to answer correctly. So it's something you can have them do in pairs or threes in small groups, and you and your counterpart teacher can walk around and be listening to everybody and helping them out. So it's a good speaking activity and also a good listening activity to make sure that the students can understand the questions that their friends are asking them. And questions in general are a really good way to practice both speaking and listening at the same time. Another one is 21 questions, if you know that game, where one person pretends to be somebody and then everyone else has to ask them questions, yes or no questions, and try to figure out who they are. This one's a little tricky as a listening activity because you really only have one person who's practicing listening, because you have one person up in the front pretending to be somebody, right? And then the other people in the class are all asking the questions. So you've got that one person listening and trying to answer the questions correctly. but the other students are still listening to their classmates, their friends ask questions. So there is some listening involved, but it's really a focused listening activity for the one person who's in front. And of course, you would have the students take turns coming to the front and doing it. If you don't know how 21 questions works, if you've never played it, basically the person in front has to choose a person. It can be a real person, it can be a fictional person, and then the other people have to ask them questions, and they have to be yes or no questions and try to figure out who that person is pretending to be. So, for example, when I do it, I always model the game first. So I go first as the person in front, and usually I pretend to be Jokowi, President Jokowi, because I don't know that many famous Indonesian people. So that's who I go with because I know about him. And then the students can ask me questions like, are you from Indonesia? Are you a woman? Are you an actor? And then I just answer yes or no until they eventually figure out who I am. But they can only ask 21 questions. So if they get to 21 questions and they haven't figured out who the person is yet, then they lose. And that person in front is the winner, right? So that's a good game for speaking and also for listening that you can do. Another thing that involves questions is you could have your students come up with a role play. You can have them do it in small groups and have every group make their own role play. And they come up to the front and they would do their role play together. And then you, as the teacher, have to ask the other students who were watching comprehension questions about what was happening in the role play. So that's a good activity where they're watching, but they also have to listen. So you should make sure that your questions are related to things that were said in the role play as opposed to things that were acted out. That way, the students really have to have understood what was being said in the role play. So that's a good listening activity that also involves some questions. Simon Says is another fun game. In the US, when we play Simon Says with little kids, it's usually Simon says go, Simon says stop, walk forward, do whatever, but you can have them do anything. Simon says jump, Simon says lay down, Simon says run around the room, Simon says spin in a circle, but it needs to be words that you have already taught them, right? If your students don't know the word spin around, then you can't play Simon Says spin around. It has to be things that you've taught them that you know the students already understand and know how to do. But it can be a fun listening game as long as all of the words are words that they know. And it's something that's fun for older kids too. I know in the US we usually play it with elementary school kids, but even high schoolers can enjoy the game depending on what the activities are that you're telling them to do in the game. So just keep in mind the age level and what they know and what they don't know and what you've already taught them. And that's a good game that you can play too. We also have two kind of similar activities, but one of them you can project a video onto the screen, and it should be something short, maybe 30 seconds. I would use something like SpongeBob because all Indonesian students know SpongeBob. They grew up watching SpongeBob. And you could have 4 or 5 students sitting with their backs to the screen looking out into the classroom. And so they can't see the video, but they have to listen to it. And then they have to explain to their classmates what was happening in the video after listening to it. So it's something where you could even do it multiple times. You could have 5 students come up and then have another clip with 5 more students. So they're practicing listening and explaining to their friends. And when they explain it, if they explain it in Bahasa Indonesia to their friends, that's okay, right? Because this isn't practicing for speaking, it's practicing for listening. So the important part is that they understand what they're hearing, while the students sitting down are watching and can see what's going on. And it's fun because if they're really wrong, then their classmates will laugh and it's kind of like a joke. So that's a good one. And another one is having a story. So you or your counterpart can tell a story, and each of the students should have a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen, and they should draw a picture of what's happening in the story while you're telling the story. So you can choose to tell the story 2 or 3 times if it's a short story and you think the students really need help. Or if your students are more advanced, you can say, I'm only going to tell you this story one time, so you have to draw what's happening. I won't repeat myself. So you can change the difficulty by how fast you talk, how many times you decide to tell the story. And then at the end, the students get to show their pictures to the class of what they think happened in the story based on what they heard. So that's another good one that you can do too. And let me think. Telephone is another good activity where the students have to stand in a line, usually 2 lines or 3 lines, and you tell the students in the back a word or a sentence, and they have to whisper it to the person in front, who whispers it to the person in front, and so on until it gets to the front. And they have to write it or draw it, if it's a picture, on the board. And whichever team is the fastest would get a point, right? So that's a good competition they can do that involves listening. And then another one is running dictation. This is usually kind of a speaking and reading game because you usually will have a sentence or a paragraph, right? It should be more like a paragraph posted on the wall somewhere or in the back of the room where one person from each team has to go back and read it and try to memorize part of it and run to their team and tell them, and they have to write it down. And the point is for the teams to be able to copy down on their paper what is written there faster than the other teams can do it. So that's a reading and speaking activity, but you can adapt it for listening by changing the paragraph from being posted there to an audio. So you could use your phone, your CP's phone. Uh, if you had another phone or two, if you have multiple groups, you could borrow them from other teachers or from students even. And you have the same audio clip on every phone. And so the students, instead of reading the paragraph and having to memorize what it says, they have to listen to the audio and then go tell their teammates what it says, and they have to write it down. So basically, one person, say you have 5 people, right? One person would go back, listen to the audio, come up, tell their team, and one person would write it. And then someone else from the team has to go back, listen again, come back, tell the next part. So one person can't do the listening every time. They have to switch. So every time someone goes back to listen, it has to be a different person. So they're taking turns. And whichever team can write down the entire transcript of the audio the fastest would be the winner. So those are just some ideas. There are a lot more ideas you can find online, or you can contact me, like I said before in the other video. You have my WhatsApp number, and you can get my email from Ananda or one of the other RMs, and I would be happy to share more ideas with you. And just have fun with teaching, and it's really exciting, and your students are going to be excited. And just remember, always make sure that your activities are paired with learning. Okay? Too much just learning is boring, and too many just activities is pointless because you're not learning anything. So you need to have the pre-activities, the during activities, the post activities, have the fun, have the learning, do it all together, and you will be successful. Your CPs will be better teachers, your students will learn a lot more, and everyone will just be a lot more excited to be in the classroom too if you're really pairing things correctly. So those are some ideas for listening and for teaching, and hopefully we'll get to meet sometime in the future because I am planning on getting back to Indonesia maybe around June or July. And I'll be in Malang in East Java. So if anyone ever is in Malang in the second half of the year while I'm there, you can contact me and maybe we can meet up and talk about Peace Corps stuff too. So sorry that I talked for so long, but hopefully it's been useful, and hopefully I'll get to meet you all in the future. Bye.